welcome to our next episode of From the Horsebox. I'm Claire.
And I'm Kate.
Our first guest today is Rebecca Jones, who's going to tell us all about hats and hat wearing, as she is a talented milliner.
And later we'll be chatting to Tom Hollins from Edgemere Saddlery near Malpas about choosing the right riding hat for you. But first of all, let's start with a few fun hat facts to get you in the mood.
Well, I didn't know that black cabs have a tall roof, so that the bowler hats can fit in.
The first dunce hat was introduced by medieval theologian John Duns. His idea was that the conical hat funneled knowledge from God into the head of the dunce.
The chef's hat has 100 folds to represent the many ways to cook an egg.
So let's get chatting to Rebecca.
In a month where we've had the coronation and we've seen the full array of military, equestrian and fashion hats and the ultimate hat being placed on the head of King Charles, what was your take on the ceremony as a milliner?
As a milliner, I thought the hats were very demure, just as you might expect for that sort of church-based occasion, or cathedral-based even. I thought that there was nothing too edgy and too high fashion. It was very appropriate for what was going on. Penny Mordaunt, I thought, was absolutely extraordinary. Her outfit was full of symbolism and that amazing gold embroidery from the royal ciphers. And she'd managed to create her own costume that was stately and powerful. And yes, it was made by a fashion designer and a fashion millinery person, but they created something that's sort of very eye-catching and very central to the ceremony.
It was really fitting.
It was really
occasion,
fitting. They were really clever to do that. And then you got the Princesses of Wales and the royal family that declined to wear tiaras. But what a great moment for British milliners to be able to create those lovely leaf headpieces to fit with all the state regalia for the occasion. No, I thought it was wonderful. But it was just interesting to see how different it was to something like Royal Ascot or a royal wedding, where people tend to go over the top and very impactful, and this was very demure and worth the occasion.
And I think because we were chatting to you, I sort of did a little bit of research and the history of the bear skins and the swan feathers, and it really is iconic of our history in this country, isn't it?
Yeah, very much so. Slightly pleased to say that in the majority of millinery, we've moved on from using exotic bird feathers, and then obviously birds are less endangered these days. We're not plucking the feathers out of them. But I mean, they've used beaver fur traditionally, which made men's top hats. And then I think when they changed to silk, to smooth the silk perfectly, they would use shark skin. So, I mean, we have great history and all sorts of different techniques, which haven't changed hugely over time, but maybe there's just less animals involved in the production.
And the term mad as a hatter has got some meaning from that, hasn't it?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, I think the chemicals that they were using back then were sort of slightly dodgy. And although I keep trying to find that chemical, I would say myself that I'm not mad yet, maybe at times around Royal Ascot period. But yeah, all the chemicals are a lot safer today. But gosh, I bet there were some interesting creations made on the back of that chemical.
So you have a huge selection of hats from top British milliners for rental or to buy. Is hiring getting more popular, being cost efficient and sustainable?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I've been going 6 or 7 seasons, give or take the COVID break in the middle. And yeah, it's really going from strength to strength. It's so tricky to find a hat on the high street, sort of a mid-range price hat. And yeah, the business has just really, but I think also that's got a lot to do with how quickly fashion changing as well. People are so much less likely to have a favoured outfit that they wear to multiple weddings, and thanks to the awfulness of social media, people want to be photographed wearing different things, and because of that, they want a different look as well for each wedding. So a hiring hat gives you the ability to wear some absolutely exquisite pieces for a fraction of the cost, and change your look relatively economically efficiently each time. And that's quite exciting as well. That brings a lot of joy and fun to the whole outfit.
Yes, well, it's great fun, isn't it, actually making the choice. So they bring their outfits and their accessories, and you have a great time trying them all on together.
Yeah, when I first bought the fledgling part of the hire collection, the lady who sold it to me said, "You'll love it now. It looks like being in a sweet shop, but I swear to you, you'll walk in one day and you'll get really bored." And that just hasn't happened. And I think it's because I quite enjoy the people interaction aspect of it as well. And, you have people that are terrified of wearing hats or feel like they should wear a hat. And I quite enjoy the process of, putting 20, 30 pieces on them until they find the shape that suddenly gives them the confidence, and their shoulders suddenly, their chest puffs out and their shoulders raise, and you can tell that they're happy. And so it's just more a question of not knowing which hats suit them. And, so many fun things happen along that process. So slightly some of it is becoming a counsellor, but,
So you never get someone who just can't wear a hat. There's something for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something for everyone. They say that the face shape dictates the hat, but I'm not sure that's entirely true. I think you've got to take the style of the outfit into account, the personality, the type of event that they're going to. Are they going to a demure church service or an investiture, or are they going to Royal Ascot? I mean, there's a whole variation in between. And the psychology of it all is quite interesting and, I'm going to say, challenging at times, but good fun.
But if you can't find exactly what you're looking for, you do offer a bespoke service. Tell us the basic steps to how do you actually start making a hat?
Well, this has been the really interesting side. So I started off hiring hats and adding to the collection alongside having my children and farming and all the other things that we ended up doing. But the bespoke hats has been a really interesting direction I didn't really expect to go into. I come from quite a creative family, but I suppose I couldn't draw or I couldn't paint. And as I started, messing around, as I call it, with the hire hats and adding a few feathers here and there when clients were asking to have the colour of the dress brought out, I suddenly started peeling back the hats and looking how Philip Tracy or Vivian Sheriff or Rachel Trevor Morgan, how they make their hats and finish their hats. And I guess that's really brought on a passion for making. So now I have a selection of wooden blocks, which I try to keep ahead of sort of this latest headband fashion and little pillboxes and the little beret kind of hats. And so, it's centuries old techniques which haven't changed. So, you dampen your straw, stretch it over the hat blocks, pin it, and then chuck it in the Aga for a day or so and try to remember that you put it in there, and stiffen it. And, it's centuries old techniques, but perhaps electricity instead of, heating your iron on the hot coals. And like we were mentioning earlier, some slightly safer chemicals to stiffen and produce a lovely sheen and lustre over the top of the materials. So
the materials, are the old-fashioned straws and the traditional materials still the best, or are there some more modern synthetic materials that you find you use?
Yeah, when hats were a fairly daily commodity, the materials were probably a lot coarser, straw sort of based. I think more recently, since about the 1980s, they've developed some fibres from banana and pineapple plants, of all things, over in the Philippines. And so it just gives these hats a very clean, structured finish. But having said that, some of the more vintage hats, I seem to accumulate them. They appear like mushrooms from people leaving bags on the doorstep or bringing cars full of old pieces. Some of those materials are absolutely exquisite. If you look at things like the veiling, that used to be hand crocheted, so it's almost like gossamer compared to modern day veiling, which is very rigid and quite thick. It loses a little bit of its femininity, but there's plenty of vintage materials around if you look, and you can create a very soft, romantic, fluid kind of look compared to a lot of the sharper, very modern materials that we use now.
So Luton, of all places, is very important for hat making traditionally.
The history part of the hats has really intrigued me on a research basis. I love nothing more than jumping into a book of costumes or millinery or fashion and pulling inspiration out of there. But who knew that Luton had anything going, apologies to anyone who comes from Luton, but who knew? But seemingly it turned out that it was the centre of millinery when we were pumping out about 70 million hats a year in a factory-based scenario. Luton was the centre. There's a few family milliners left there, and certainly the dyers and the suppliers of all the modern day or current fabrics and feathers and trimmings, they're all still based in Luton, but they're few and far between. I did go to meet one of the oldest families down there once, and I'd been warned that the guy was quite extraordinary, so he met me in a pirate's tricorn hat and sort of knee breeches and all this sort of thing. And I wandered around his wedding collection, sort of umming and ahhing, thinking, oh, this is very normal. I'm quite surprised you're dressed like this. Anyway, at the end, he handed me a business card, and it turned out he had quite a different business going on around the back to supplement his millinery business, which was some very nice PVC items, but unfortunately I didn't get the tour of that.
Let's talk colours. So what's popular today, and can you get all the colours to match, sort of thing?
I think at the moment there's this amazing trend for green, and coming from a racing background, I was always it was battered into us that you just didn't wear green. It was superstitious or bad luck at weddings or racing. But recently, green has exploded into fashion, and personally, I'm not convinced that a green hat is great complementary wise for skin colours, so I tend to veer away from that and try and add a bit of green into another colour hat in order to tie in with someone's
Makes me
dress.
think of Robin Hood with his pheasant.
Yeah, exactly. But it has this amazing ability to make people look quite ill. It's rarely complementary against the skin. Fine in a dress, but just against the face, it's not great. And other colours, I mean, really, fashion just changes so quickly at the moment that there almost isn't a colour that's in vogue anymore. It's a shape or a dress that's been worn by a celebrity last week that's suddenly copied and churned out, and it can be any colour. But yeah, I mean, I really do enjoy the bespoke aspect of it. I don't dye at the moment. That's the next stage I'd like to get to, bespoke dyeing, but I just need some more time to free up to devote to that, because it's quite an how do I describe it? It's not an exact science. I think even the best milliners can suddenly find that things haven't gone quite to plan. And unfortunately, I don't really have that time.
But in the country, we wear a lot of green hats. The weather is a deciding factor. So what would you advise for the country dweller to look good with their hat wearing?
I think for starters, the green of tweeds is a very muted kind of shade of green, often heading towards an olive. So forget what I said earlier. That's for the sort of the emerald greens and the really deep, intense ones. I mean, it obviously works. People have been wearing them for ages, and I would, although there are people wanting more and more exciting. I say that with apostrophes around each end. Exciting winter hats. I think the best ones are the ones that have people's favourites. That they've had for years, has got battered in the wind and the rain, and actually people aren't worried about wearing them in weather. So there's lovely old racing trilbies and fedoras and things like that. I think
the more battered the better.
Yeah, the more battered the better. Let's not get high fashion out in the pouring rain.
Because when you pull off your riding hat, and you've got hat hair, the first thing you reach for is your trusty bobble hat.
Yeah, absolutely. Big fan, especially if it's got fleece on the inside. That's my absolute favourite, a fleecy bobble hat.
And you love a recycling challenge of vintage hats, as you said.
Yeah, completely. If anyone's got any Philip Tracy's hiding away that they haven't seen for years and they'd like a new look out of it. People, I mean, I call that vintage, that's probably 1980s, but recently, a lady turned up with possibly 60 of her mother's hats from the 1940s that she was just about to give away to charity until someone very kindly mentioned I might be interested in them. But this lady had gone to Ascot for 5 days a week for sort of 10, 20 years. So she had the most amazing array of hats. And there are just pieces you can take from them. So it might be the base material or it might be a trimming. And I love the idea that we can save them from the landfill, and that they can be reworked often just by changing a shape or sharpening a shape or stiffening it. We can make it very viable for current fashion.
Gosh, if they could talk those hats, what they saw
Absolutely.
all those years ago.
Absolutely.
So how do you see the industry in the future?
I think it's an interesting question. I mean, I keep referring to Philip Tracy, but he is sort of the hat god of millinery. And what's he do that's different? He tries to invent hats that people have never seen before, whereas I think a lot of millinery isn't high fashion, and it's just making the most of a person and their outfit. So therefore it doesn't change, and it doesn't sort of skip too fast ahead with the times. I mean, the headband, I suppose, would be the biggest change in recent years. And again, that's practical reasons, as you might know, Kate, because I've just made one for you. But you lose that big brim. The mothers of the bride aren't being overshadowed by a huge brim. The photos look better because your face is exposed.
They're better for kissing.
Yeah, well, that's very important, isn't it?
So mothers of the bride are not wearing, this is my space hat, with
not
the
so
big...
much. Yeah, there's been a real change and a move away from that very classic sort of formal suit with enormous brim hat. I'm finding particularly that a lot of people are going out spending some money on a dress that they would A, they really like, and B, they could imagine wearing again.
But it'll definitely give the wow factor. From 70 million hats produced in Luton to nowadays we have a much more strategic way of wearing hats. What's been the gradual process?
I think when you go back to those sort of times in the 1930s, I think it was particularly, the type of hat you were wearing was very much denoted where you stood in the class structure. I mean, every trade had its own particular hat. The butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker, they all had hats. Your sort of, I'm just thinking of Downton Abbey way of describing this. Your below stairs had perhaps 2 or 3 hats that they would have for best or for church. Whereas everyone else upstairs was sort of with the latest fashions. And then I think it was the introduction of the car suddenly meant that people weren't trudging along in the rain and needed to protect their hairstyles. And suddenly hats just started to fall by the wayside. And it's arguable that people like Princess Diana in the 1980s really brought hat wearing back from the brink and brought it back for social occasions and perhaps made it more into a sort of fashionable industry. I think it was her going away hat that John Boyd made for her that really sparked interest again. And that's true to this day. It's thanks to the younger royals who are pulling out headbands at christenings and things like that. And you really notice the style of hats that people come into the hat room and ask for after there has been a royal wedding or a christening or something. They are very much noted, and people like to copy the style.
And that goes hand in hand with social changes, because after the war, when they came back from the war, they were fed up with wearing hats, the military hats, and then people's lives had changed, hadn't they?
Well, I suppose it was so uniform based, wasn't it? The hats were part of a uniform and everyone had a uniform, so we knew clearly what they were doing and who they were and what they were up to. And I guess that sort of faded out slightly, and then hats became very much a celebratory item to complete an outfit rather than a measure of where you stood in the social hierarchy.
So what I want to know is, how do you fit this all in with 2 children, Octavia and William, aged 5 and 7, and your husband runs a large mixed farm? Do you get any time to be roped into the farming as well?
I have been known to be pulled out of the odd hat appointment to go and chase loose cattle around the river meadows.
What hat do you wear for that?
I wear many different hats, literally and metaphorically. So the children are really keen little farmers and milliners. There's nothing more they enjoy than intruding on someone's appointment and sort of making their own suggestions. But I'm having to try and keep this to a minimum now because it doesn't always work out.
Does the countryside inspire?
Yes, certainly Shropshire is very inspiring. It's always been home, and the countryside has always woven such a deep thread along my life. I've had a very unusual career trajectory to get to hats. And in fact, I remember at 18, I was at the high school in Shrewsbury and I filled out one of those careers quiz test sort of things. And at the end, it said that I should be a gamekeeper, and no one really knew what to do with me after that.
So let's finish with some quick-fire questions. Do you want to start, Claire?
Yeah, dressage or cross-country hat?
Cross country every time, without a doubt.
Contrasting handbag and shoes or matchy-matchy?
Oh, it's got to be contrasting.
Sun hat or party hat?
Party hat. I'm going to Ibiza next week and I'll be packing my party hat and my party dress.
How amazing. So finally, we like to finish with either a joke or a motto.
Very boringly, I couldn't come up with a joke to better little Freddie Fernals. So I'm going to go with a motto or a saying that's put me in very good stead through life. I was reading Richard Branson's autobiography, and he said, if you're presented with an amazing opportunity, always say yes and then work out how to do it later. And I can't tell you the amount of times that has led to something really good when I've conquered my fears, said yes, and then very much learnt how to do what I'm supposed to do very quickly.
That's what we said when we started this project, isn't it, Kate? Well, thank you, Tom, for sparing the time to talk to From the Horsebox about riding hats. And you sell an awful lot here, don't you, in Malpas at Edgemere?
Yes, no, thank you for having me. We are very busy selling riding hats. We believe in the safety and comfort of each and every rider. We're always here to help.
Would you say that the equestrian world is quite traditional in its dress code and slow to change? For example, do you have people now who come in asking for a traditional hat?
We have a really varied audience, to be honest. We have everybody in from more traditional people who want your traditional velvet hat. So your hunting people, your showing people, also people that just hack out and want that more traditional look. They've grown up wearing velvet hats and that's what they're used to. All the way through to your more modern people, your kids coming through that want the glitz and glamour and the fancy hats. Because that's what their friends ride in and that's what their sort of idols that ride wear those hats. So it's a real mixed bag of customers, really.
So you wouldn't say that the velvet is dying out then?
It's definitely less than it used to be, but definitely not dying out. There's still a demand there for it.
So do you sell the most of the modern ones? Because I can see they're stunning, all shapes, colours, variations.
The peak ones are very popular. I think... obviously, people now sort of are going down the line of caring about what they look like a lot more. But safety is also very important. For instance, the MIPS technology, which is quite new out.
So what is MIPS technology?
MIPS is multi-directional impact protection system.
So is that the latest, the gold standard?
Yes, it's a new technology that's hit the equestrian world. It's well known, obviously, in the ski industry. It's designed to add protection against rotational motion, so it reduces the impact on the brain from angled impacts to the head, which is how most riders would fall.
So is that what the dial is on the back of the helmet?
No, so the dial is a separate system. That's more of a fitting mechanism, so that helps to fit sort of either slightly different shaped heads or to have a more perfect fit, really. So MIPS is, we have a demonstration model in the shop, which helps to just demonstrate how it actually works. It's quite difficult to explain, but it just sort of has slightly more movement within the hat, which reduces that direct impact.
So with the MIPS and the dial, you've got the safety and the comfort, because obviously if it's more comfortable, you're going to choose to wear that.
Oh yes, definitely. There's massive movements forward in comfort and style, as well as safety as well. Really.
Is there anything which triggers a spike in sale?
Your competition rider, really. I think sort of your dressage riders, your show jumping riders, they're quite driven by fashions and trends and the latest hats and what they look like. And your eventers as well. I think at one time eventers never were that blingy. I think they've sort of caught on and want to look smart and look good as well. So I think there's definitely something out there for everybody.
I suppose it's important for your confidence. If you look well, you ride well.
If you look good, you feel good in yourself, don't you? So you ride with more confidence, I think. I think that's goes through everything really, doesn't it?
So do you think people have sort of several hats for different occasions?
Definitely with eventing, I think people have definitely a cross-country hat and then one that they would potentially do just their dressage in, or their dressage and their show jumping. And even from speaking to customers now, people have a home hat and a show hat. So they sort of save their expensive hat for when they're in the ring and want to look smart.
Well, some of the modern ones are very lightweight, which is nice for the summer, isn't it? It's really refreshing just to put something so light on
And
your
more
head.
breathable as well. Obviously, you've got air vents in them as well. And also, a lot of them have detachable liners now, so you can wash them and feel a little bit cleaner and more hygienic as well.
So Charles Owen hats are made very close to here in Wrexham. Do you have a lot to do with the technology that they introduce?
We work really closely with Charles Owen, and obviously with them being close is a massive bonus for us. They're really good and supply us very quickly. We've been to the factory ourselves and seen the hats being produced, which is an amazing experience. The care and dedication that goes into each hat is phenomenal. And even the testing that they do on the hats is amazing. So actually the thought and process between each hat is...
Have you ever taken feedback from customers back to Charles Owen that's been helpful to them? Do you get feedback through you back to the manufacturers at all?
For instance, a good friend of mine had a rotational fall, which was a complete freak accident, and she was absolutely fine. The horse was fine, but we sent her hat back to be cut in two, and obviously it did do its job and protect her, but the damage to the membrane, for instance, it had a massive big dent in it. So like they explained, had she worn that hat again and had a fall in a similar position or that spot on the hat, it wouldn't have protected her head in the same way, which I think is a big message for a lot of people, to replace the hat if they do have a direct impact on the helmet.
Do we differ in choices, do you think, to equestrians abroad in other countries, or do you think that we're fairly similar now with this modern approach?
I think we're definitely catching up.
Catching up?
Yeah, I think, for instance, the big peak helmets came out abroad before they were here. I think even in fashion, I think sometimes
Is the big peak a fashion or a safety issue?
Not really a safety issue. It's more of a, I probably just want to say commodity, really. Obviously, when you're riding abroad, it's usually sunnier than our weather here. So it's more protection from the sun. But then I think that has come through as a bit of a fashion statement in the UK sometimes as well.
Do you have a favourite at all? I know you ride yourself. You must choose.
I'm a big fan of Charles Owen hats and Uvex hats. I grew up wearing Charles Owen hats, and they fit well and safe, I think, from that point of view, I think. And they look good as well.
They look neat, don't they?
Yeah.
Look neat and tidy. So, have you got any tips for anybody coming in wanting to buy a hat? How to look the part, be a more confident rider?
My biggest advice to anybody would be to make sure you go to somewhere, a saddlery which is fully equipped with a good stock of helmets and with qualified hat fitters. People buying hats online, as a fitter myself, does scare me a little bit. Unless you're replacing your hat, I would always say get fitted properly, because having a correctly fitted hat is so important. If we're ever in any doubt, we call the experts in, and if we've got anybody like with a slightly different shaped head that we're unsure of, we would always get Charles Owen or the manufacturers in to come in and help and make sure we're sending the person off in the safest hat possible.
Yeah. And my last question, do they stand up to the mud and the rain, living in the country, these modern hats?
Yeah, I'd say 9 times out of 10 they do. Obviously, it depends on the material. For instance, Charles Owen do a leather look one or a suede one. Obviously, when they get wet, obviously they will have a certain amount of damage, but to be honest, they do bounce back and they are thoroughly tested before they do hit the mark. And
do people still buy hairnets, or is that very old-fashioned?
No, we still sell a lot of hairnets, actually. Yeah, a lot. I think, especially girls with long hair, they want to look smart. So even now, sort of, girls do tuck their hair up underneath the hat, which does affect the fitting of a helmet. So we always sort of ask people how they wear their hair, because obviously that has a massive impact on how tight or loose the hat is. So yeah, hairnets are still very popular.
Thank you ever so much, Tom, for talking to me. It's fascinating. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much to Rebecca and Tom. Although we're not bound by such stringent rules on hat wearing, we still retain them firmly embedded in our culture, and they provide a story of much of Britain's history. I know what I'll be reaching for this summer, and it's my puppy show straw hat, and in the winter, my Charles Owen.
And I actually have a new Rebecca Jones creation, which I'm much looking forward to wearing.
Please spread the word about From the Horse Box.
and we look forward to our next episode when it could be you in the driving seat.